Hello, Wellspring. So today we are going to be doing the readings for February 16th and 17th. Sorry, I missed yesterday's or was late on yesterday's. So we're going to do Deuteronomy chapter 2 and Deuteronomy chapter 3 together here today. And I'll just share a little bit of reflection about both chapters. So let's dig into it. I'm going to be reading from the NIV. And again, we're in the final book of the Pentateuch. And we're going to jump in with chapter 2. Here we go. Excuse me. Then we turned back and set out towards the wilderness along the route to the Red Sea, as the Lord had directed me. For a long time we made our way around the hill country of Seir. Then the Lord said to me, "You have made your way around this hill country long enough. Now turn north. Give the people these orders. You are about to pass through the territory of your relatives, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, but be very careful. Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land, not even enough to put your foot on. I have given Esau the hill country of Seir as his own. You are to pay them in silver for the food you eat and the water you drink. The Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He's watched over your journey through this vast wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you, and you have not lacked anything." So we went on past our relatives, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir. We turned from the Arabah road, which comes up from Elath and Ezion Geber, and traveled along the desert road of Moab. Then the Lord said to me, "Do not harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any part of their land. I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. The Emites used to live there, a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. Like the Anakites, they too were considered Rephites, but the Moabites called them the Emites. Horites used to live in Seir, but the descendants of Esau drove them out. They destroyed the Horites from before them and settled in their place, just as Israel did in the land the Lord gave them as their possession. And the Lord said, 'Now get up and cross the Zered Valley.' So we crossed the valley. 38 years passed from the time we left Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Zered Valley. By then, the entire generation of fighting men had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn to them. The Lord's hand was against them until he had completely eliminated them from the camp. Now, when the last of these fighting men among the people had died, the Lord said to me, 'Today you are to pass by the region of Moab at Ar. When you come to the Ammonites, do not harass them or provoke them to war, for I will not give to you possession of any of the land belonging to the Ammonites. I have given it as a possession to the descendants of Lot.' This too was considered a land of the Rephites, who used to live there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzamites. They were a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. The Lord destroyed them from before the Ammonites, who drove them out and settled in their place. The Lord had done the same for the descendants of Esau who lived in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites from before them. They drove them out and have lived in their place to this day. As for the Avites who lived in the villages as far as Gaza, the Caphtorites, coming out of the Caphtor, destroyed them and settled in their place. Set out now and cross the Arnon Gorge. See, I have given into your hand Sihon, the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his country. Begin to take possession of it and engage him in battle. This very day I will begin to put the terror and fear of you on all nations under heaven. They will hear reports of you and will tremble and be in anguish because of you. From the desert of Kedemoth I sent messengers to Sihon, king of Heshbon, offering peace and saying, 'Let us pass through your country. We will stay on the main road. We will not turn aside to the right or to the left. Sell us food to eat and water to drink for their price in silver. Only let us pass through on foot, as the descendants of Esau who live in Seir and the Moabites who live in Ar did for us, until we cross the Jordan into the land the Lord our God is giving us.' But Sihon, king of Heshbon, refused to let us pass through, for the Lord your God had made his spirit stubborn and his heart obstinate in order to give him into your hands, as he has now done. The Lord said to me, 'See, I have begun to deliver Sihon and his country over to you. Now begin to conquer and possess the land.' When Sihon and all his army came out to meet us in battle at Jahaz, the Lord our God delivered him over to us, and we struck him down together with his sons and his whole army. At that time, we took all his towns and completely destroyed them. Men, women, and children, we left no survivors. But the livestock and the plunder from the towns we had captured, we carried off for ourselves. From Aroer on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, and from the town into the gorge, even as far as Gilead. Not one town was too strong for us. The Lord our God gave us all of them. But in accordance with the command of the Lord our God, we did not encroach on any of the land of the Ammonites, neither the land along the course of the Jabbok, nor around the towns in the hills. And we'll jump into chapter 3. Next we turned up and went along the road toward Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, with his whole army marched out to meet us in battle at Edrei. The Lord said to me, "Do not be afraid of him, for I have delivered him into your hands, along with his whole army and his land. Do to him what you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon." So the Lord our God also gave into our hands Og, king of Bashan, and all his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. At that time we took all of his cities. There was not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them. The whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls and with gates and bars, and there were also a great many unwalled villages. We completely destroyed them as we had done with Sihon, king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children. But all the livestock and the plunder from the cities we carried off for ourselves. So at that time we took from these two kings of the Amorites, the territory east of the Jordan, and from the Arnon Gorge as far as Mount Hermon. Hermon is called Sirion by the Sidonians, and the Amorites call it Sinir. We took all the towns on the plateau and Gilead, and all Bashan as far as Salecah and Edrei, towns of Og's kingdom in Bashan. Og, king of Bashan, was the last of the Rephites. His bed was decorated with iron and was more than 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. It is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites. Of the land we took, over at that time, I gave the Reubenites and the Gadites the territory north of Aroer by the Arnon Gorge, including half the hill country of Gilead, together with its towns, the rest of Gilead, and also all of Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half-tribe of Manasseh. The whole region of Argob in Bashan used to be known as a land of the Rephites. Jair, a descendant of Manasseh, took the whole region of Argob as far as the border of the Gershites and the Maachatites. It was named after him, so that to this day Bashan is called Havoth Jair. And I gave Gilead to Machir. But to the Reubenites and the Gadites I gave the territory extending from Gilead down to the Arnon Gorge, the middle of the gorge being the border, and out to the Jabbok River, which is the border of the Ammonites. Its western border was the Jordan and the Arabah, from Kinnereth to the Sea of the Arabah, that is, the Dead Sea, below the slopes of Pisgah. I commanded you at that time, the Lord your God has given you this land to take possession of it. But all your able-bodied men, armed for battle, must cross over ahead of the Israelites. However, your wives, your children, and your livestock, I know you have much livestock, may stay in the towns I have given to you, until the Lord gives the rest to your fellow Israelites as he has to you. And they too have taken over the land that the Lord your God is giving them across the Jordan. After that, each of you may go back to the possession I have given him. At that time I commanded Joshua, you have seen with your own eyes all that the Lord your God has done to these two kings. The Lord will do the same to all the kingdoms over there where you are going. Do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God himself will fight for you. At that time I pleaded with the Lord, Sovereign Lord, you have begun to show to your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do the deeds and mighty works that you do? Let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that fine hill country in Lebanon. But because of you the Lord was angry with me and would not listen to me. That is enough, the Lord said. Do not speak to me any more about this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah and look west and north and south and east. Look at the land with your own eyes, since you are not going to cross this Jordan. But commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, For he will lead this people across and will cause them to inherit the land that you will see. So we stayed in the valley near Beth Peor. So one of the things that immediately jumps out to me in this text is the idea that God is very directive to the people of Israel. He gives them clear directions as which people groups they should maintain peace with, and which ones they should battle with, and which ones, what land they should take and what land they shouldn't take. And God had given land to previous people, to the descendants of Lot and to the descendants of Esau. And remember, God had promised to those families that that land would be theirs. And so in this picture, we see a combination of things. We see God being faithful to his word, even to the non-Hebrew people, right? God said to Lot, this is the land that Abraham's giving you, that I'm giving you. God said to Esau, here's the lands that you're going to be in as you're driven out, right? As you're out in this other location. And God maintains his faithfulness in that space. And then simultaneously, the people that God has called, their disobedience has caused them to wander for 38 years in the desert, for another 2 years as they're moving into this space. And they're paying the cost of not listening to God, of not obeying the command to go and take the promised land because they had been afraid. And so now, as they've been paying that cost, God is giving them directions, very clear directions, that they're to obey, that they're to listen to the Lord's direction and walk in. And I think, how often is it that we find ourselves in a place where we say, if I just had some very clear direction from the Lord, it would be easy to make choices. It'd be easy to obey. And we see that God's hand is with the Israelites when they choose to act in obedience. They go through the different lands and kingdoms that they're not supposed to attack, that they're not supposed to rise up against. They pay them the silver they're supposed to pay for food and for water. And then when God says, go ahead and attack, God gives them victory, and they have the ability to overcome Og, king of Bashan, and my brain is slipping on the other king's name right now. But the other king, the previous king prior to Og. And it's just interesting to see God's path and God's plan works out when they choose obedience. So they've been paying the cost for 40 years for their disobedience. And now again, they're seeing obedience to God leads to good spaces. I find myself just reflecting on this section of scripture. It's difficult. It's hard for us to wrestle with this idea of, particularly with our Western minds, of destroying an entire nation and wiping out all of their families. That's not an easy thing for us to understand. Part of it is the cultural context. We have to recognize that this is a normal practice for the peoples and cultures of this time. When you took out an enemy, you took out all of them, because if you didn't, you would fear that they would rise up again and come back for vengeance. You took out all of them because their gods, their cultures, their influences could creep into your culture, could creep in and influence your people in ways that you didn't want them to be influenced. And so while this feels really difficult for us to wrestle with today, it was a relatively common practice in this time period, that when you took over a people group, you wiped out everyone. You took out everyone to avoid, like I said, the cultural infections, as well as the potential for revenge seekers to come against you or to create issues for you in the future. And some of this violence gets ascribed to God in this space, like God sent us and God had us do this, right? I just want to remind you that the Old Testament, and actually all of Scripture, is recording things within the cultural context and time in which it's written. So we have to understand that while the Israelites were obeying God's direction, they were going to war when God said to go to war, and they were operating in some levels of obedience in this space as compared to previously. This challenge is, or this process for them where they're ascribing to God that they killed every man, woman, and child, is potentially just a reflection of their culture. It's just a reflection of their time. They're writing in a time and space where that's the normal process. And so they might have taken this idea or taken their natural cultural processes, their warfaring processes, and enacted them and recognized victory and said, oh, God had us do all of that. Where that may or may not have been God's intended direction or will for that moment. But Scripture's recording what happens, and they're recording it within the lens of the victor, right? And they're recording it within the lens of their own cultural time and space. So I know this is hard stuff for us to wrestle with. It's hard stuff for us to chew on. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me, Pastor Jerry, Pastor Don. We can talk further and go further in depth with some of this stuff. And we're more than willing to do that with you, just to talk through some of this process. There's a lot of writers who have written about this space, about why it looks like this, and we can drink deep from wise authors and theologians who have gone before us. And we can also ask God to help us understand, to help us comprehend, to help us wrestle with the spaces that are difficult. The big thing that I want us to take away today, and the big thing that I'd really love for you to just wrestle with, is to say, God, I want to hear your voice. I want to hear your direction. I don't want to choose disobedience. I want to choose obedience. I want what's best for me, not, or what you have planned that's best for me, not what I want for myself. And then when you start to hear those things, when you start to get those inclinations from the Spirit, when the Word of God leads you in that direction, to choose obedience and to choose it quickly and to do the things that God asks us to do as He asks us to do them. It's a beautiful space to live, Wellspring. That's a beautiful space to walk in the holiness of God. And His plans and His paths for us are better than what we have for ourselves anyways. So again, if you have questions, if you want to talk further about this stuff, I'm more than willing to dive into it with you. More than willing to, I'm sure Pastor Jerry would do it, Pastor Don would do it. You can reach out to us and have more conversation. For now, God bless you. Have a great day, and we'll be back at it tomorrow. Bye.